The skyscraper stood tall against the morning sky, its glass walls glinting like a symbol of power and success. Inside, executives in sharp suits hurried across polished marble floors, their eyes glued to screens, minds weighed down with numbers, deadlines, and crises. But among them walked someone whose presence they rarely noticed, a man in worn shoes pushing a mop bucket with quiet determination. His name was Daniel Hayes. Daniel was a janitor in the building, the kind of man most people overlooked. His uniform was faded, his hands calloused, and his face carried the marks of years of hardship. But behind those tired eyes lay a depth few could ever imagine. For Daniel wasn't just a janitor. He was a single father who carried the world on his shoulders for the sake of his little girl, Lily. Lily was 10 years old, full of curiosity, and though life had given her more struggle than comfort, she never failed to smile when her father came home from work. After his wife passed away when Lily was just 5, Daniel had been left to raise her alone. He took any job he could find, scrubbing floors, cleaning toilets, emptying trash. Whatever it took to put food on the table and keep a roof over their heads. To the world he was invisible. To Lily he was everything. That morning, Daniel moved through the halls quietly, listening to the faint echoes of arguments coming from the top-floor boardroom. Something was wrong. He had overheard fragments of conversation in recent days. Words like crisis, collapse, and hundreds of millions at stake. He didn't know much about the world of corporate giants, but he could sense the storm brewing. What no one in that building knew, however, was that Daniel once had a life that looked nothing like this. Before tragedy struck, before he was forced to trade dreams for survival, he had been a mathematician, a brilliant one. Numbers weren't just equations to him, they were a language, a symphony he understood deeply. He had been on track for a remarkable career, but when his wife fell ill, everything changed. Bills piled up, opportunities slipped away, and Daniel chose family over ambition. He never regretted it. But it meant that the genius who once solved problems others couldn't, now swept floors for a living. That day fate decided to reveal him. The CEO of the company, Richard Coleman, was pacing the boardroom like a lion in a cage. His team sat stiff, beads of sweat forming on their foreheads. A contract had gone wrong, numbers didn't align, and a miscalculation threatened to cost the company over $100 million. Their investors were panicking, their stocks tumbling, and in hours, the company could crumble. Voices clashed, fingers pointed, papers scattered across the long oak table, but no solution came. Daniel, pushing his mop down the corridor, passed by the open door. Normally he would keep his head down, stay invisible. But one sheet of paper on the floor caught his eye, a spreadsheet printout filled with figures, margins, percentages. For a brief second his mind instinctively read it, the way an artist sees color in everything, the way a musician hears rhythm in noise. Something didn't add up. His heart thudded. He hesitated, torn between walking away or daring to speak. Years of being ignored, dismissed, even ridiculed for being just the janitor, had taught him to stay silent. But then he thought of Lily, her tiny voice telling him every night, "Daddy, you're the smartest person I know." Daniel swallowed hard, stepped closer, and knocked gently on the doorframe. The boardroom fell silent. Dozens of eyes turned, some frowning, others annoyed. Yes, the CEO snapped, not hiding his irritation. "Sir," Daniel said quietly, holding the paper. "I think there might be an error in these numbers." The room erupted with murmurs and muffled laughter. An executive muttered under his breath, "The janitor thinks he found our mistake." Daniel's face flushed, but he didn't back down. He stepped inside, placed the paper on the table, and pointed to a column. His voice shook, but his words were steady. "This calculation here, it's off by a single misaligned formula. It looks small, but it cascades into the entire projection. If you adjust it, the losses won't be nearly as catastrophic. In fact," he scribbled on a notepad quickly, numbers flowing effortlessly. "If you shift the allocation here and renegotiate this clause, you don't lose $100 million. You actually save $30 million. The room froze. Executives leaned in, scanning his notes. Their jaws dropped. One of the analysts frantically opened her laptop, typing furiously. Within seconds, her screen confirmed it. Daniel was right. A janitor had just solved a $100 million crisis in seconds. The CEO stared at him, stunned into silence. For the first time in years, Daniel felt truly seen. The laughter died. The mockery vanished. In its place grew awe. Who are you?" Richard Coleman finally asked, his voice quieter, almost humbled. Daniel took a breath, his eyes misting. I'm just a father. I clean your floors. But once I used to work with numbers. The CEO's chest tightened. He saw not a janitor, but a man who had given up everything for love, who carried brilliance inside him, hidden under the weight of survival. For Daniel, that moment was more than solving an equation. It was reclaiming a piece of himself he thought he had buried forever. It was proof that no matter how invisible the world made him feel, he still mattered. As the executives scrambled to fix the contracts with Daniel's correction, Richard walked over and extended his hand. Mr. Hayes, today, you saved this company. And you reminded me that greatness isn't about titles or suits, it's about heart. Daniel shook his hand, quietly whispering, I just did what I could. But deep down something had shifted. A door had opened. The man who had been overlooked, underestimated, and forgotten had just left an entire room speechless.